Welcome to the Voice of Supply Chain. I am your host, Katherine, and the show is brought to you by ISM New Jersey, as well as my dog, Ellie. She's going to be in the background today. Um, she's usually in the corner somewhere minding her own business, but today she's going to be with us. If you see her chasing her tail, don't worry, she's fine. She's a cattle dog. She does that. But we have a really cool show today. And I am so excited to have Michael Shields on the show. He's going to share his story. It's another interesting one. You guys know we don't disappoint here. There's always twists and turns. And so I am so excited to introduce Michael. He is head of procurement at Tropic. And he's in a really interesting position as somebody head of procurement at a procurement tech company. So a solution provider and a practitioner. He's got an incredible background. Early days starting at Honeywell. He rose through the ranks of procurement, then transformative roles at Qualtrics and a few others after. And now transitioning into Tropic, he's bringing a wealth of experience to help businesses rethink procurement in the tech world. And so without further ado, let me bring on Michael. Welcome.
Well, hello, Katherine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. We're finally getting a chance to do this. We've been preparing for, I don't know, I think it was a couple months ago when I reached out. So I'm so glad you're finally here.
Thanks for hosting me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah, me too. And I'm excited. I'm a huge fan of Tropic. I've loved following their journey and their brand evolutions and, the product evolution over the last 3-4 years. And so I think you're a very unique guest for us today because of being at a solution provider and also being head of procurement as a practitioner. It's just going to be a really unique point of view, and I'm excited to dig into it. And before we get into all the questions and conversation, I want to remind everybody watching, feel free to add your comments, say hello, and we'll try to stop and answer your questions as they come through. And okay, I see Kathy. Kathy's in there working the group. Well, let's get right into it. Michael, describe yourself in 3 words.
Oh, thanks for the heads up on that. I did not, which is meant to be facetious because I did not have that. 3 words. I will say, oh man, 3 words. Okay. I'd say intentional would be kind of one word. I have to use the word passionate, honestly, just because like life is short. Like I turned 40 this year, which kind of blows my mind. And if you're not excited about living about life and excited about what you're doing, like I feel like, I don't know, you're just missing out. You're going to wake up and wish you were. So that's the other word. 3rd word, gosh, I don't know. The word that comes to mind is just like relationship, like for me, whether it's my family who, I love and adore them, but also just in business, like I'm a big fan of like building relationships is where business happens, like the success I've had, there's probably a lot of luck. But it's also because I built some relationships and people were willing to take risks on me because of that relationship and because they knew who I was. So I don't know. I feel like there are probably much better answers to those questions, but that's what comes to mind for me. So
yeah, I'd say all of that tracks based on what we're going to talk about today. And welcome to the 40 Club.
Not yet. I am not in that club yet. Yes, this year, but I'm hanging on. I'm hanging on for a few more months. So
well, I'm ahead. I'm 41. So I will impart wisdom upon you about being 40.
I will graciously accept said wisdom. Yes.
Okay, a few people coming through. It looks like Evan Curran from New Jersey is joining us. Kristen Blake from Las Vegas. Hello, thanks for tuning in. And I think where I love, and Tori Esposito, great to see you as well from New Jersey.
Wow, New
Um,
Jersey representing. Okay.
yeah, I
Cool.
mean, ISM New Jersey, they've got to. They've got
You know,
to.
I'm going off script here a little bit. I don't know if there's a script, but Honeywell was based in New Jersey. And so the first 8 years of my career, I would make, occasional trips out to Morristown. So anyway, I've got some
Nice.
experience in New Jersey. Yeah.
Cool. Um, well, just like past episodes we've done before, I do like to start in your early life and learning about some of those formative years, because I do see a lot of mirroring from early life to professional life and who you've become, especially with procurement people. It's really interesting. So I want to just real quickly talk about your childhood. What kind of kid were you?
You know, very good question. When I got married, my dad said, "I hope you have a kid just like you," and he meant it in a way that, like, it was a little bit of a challenge, but so I would maybe appreciate, the parent he was. No, I think I always sought kind of fun adventure. One thing that's really unique about me, and I don't think I fully realized it was unique. Like, you know, my I was one of six kids, and so there wasn't a ton of money to go around. I wouldn't say like we were necessarily poor, but you know. Uh, you didn't get the nicest thing, lots of hand me downs. But my dad and my mom taught me, work really hard. And so by the time I graduated high school, I had saved $20,000 of my own money, which is, and keep in mind I'm 40. So like back then, like, and I don't know that many teenagers now, some of that was kind of forced savings. My parents had this rule of like, hey, for every dollar you earn, you have to save 50% of it. But yeah, that was a big impacted my life for so many ways. Okay. So number one, it taught me, just the value of a dollar, to work hard. If there were things, my parents would provide the essentials, but if there was something like, hey, instead of that pair of shoes from Walmart or whatever, if I wanted that pair of Nikes, that's something I had to buy, type of a thing. So it taught me to work hard. It taught me the value of a dollar, but it also set me up later in life so that way I didn't have to go into debt for other big transactions. It put me in a good spot for college and et cetera. So I think that makes me a little bit unique, and I'm not trying to say that in like I mean, $20,000 is a lot of money for a kid, but it really was me working hard in high school and even before that. So
Yeah, I mean, I think about my parents asked me to save 75% of all my paychecks, and most of that went to car insurance, but
yeah.
I never had that much. I think I would get up to like $500 and then my account would be cleared to pay for car stuff. But man, 20 grand, even now, even for a kid now, 17, I have a 17-year-old. I would love to see him save like that. That would
Well,
be,
I couldn't touch it if I wanted to. It came out of my account and it went into an account that I didn't manage, and so at the time it could be frustrating, like I want to spend it. But when I turned 18, I had a nice little chunk of money there, which is great. So yeah.
so I was waiting for you when you were going to answer about 3 words to describe you. I was waiting for you to say adventurous, because I think based on your early life going into adulthood and the places that you lived would kind of spark that adventurous aspect of a person. Tell me about growing up and living overseas.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to live overseas 4 different times in my life. And what's so interesting is the world is an incredible place. It just is, and I've had the experience to, travel, internationally for business, and sometimes when you live wherever you live, whether it's New Jersey or Las Vegas, or I can't remember where the people were calling in from, or Utah, where I am, you kind of get to know what life is like in your area. And then you go, even domestically, if you go, to another part of the country, it's kind of eye opening. You learn something. But I really feel like it's helped me just kind of be more accepting as a human and a person, whether it's, open to new ideas, new foods, new ways of thinking. And I think that was also a big advantage for me. Yeah. So living in places, I remember some of my earliest memories were in Turkey, and going across the border into Syria, actually. And I remember, just seeing a world in Syria where, you would go see this ancient archaeological site, and so much history there, and then I spent some time in Europe and Germany, and incredible people there. You'd go to the candy store, and you'd have to like communicate with them about how many of what you wanted. And of course, you've gone by yourself. You've taken some of that money you earned, but just helped me become more of a global citizen, I guess, and just understanding that there's not one right way to do things. There's so many different ways to do things, and that one isn't necessarily better than the other, and that's okay.
So do you think that helped influence some of your later life decisions and career choices?
Yeah, I think so, because and I don't want to jump ahead too much, but I was at Honeywell for 8 years, and it was an awesome experience. I started on the direct side of the business for procurement, moved to the indirect side of the business. There's different segments. It's a massive, massive company, and when I was debating moving to another company, a company called Qualtrics had reached out, and I think Qualtrics is fairly well known today, but back then it wasn't as well known. In fact, I personally had to like Google, what does Qualtrics do, but I had some friends that worked there, so it was subliminally, I was aware of it, and as I learned more about it, I thought, hey, this is a really cool opportunity. But my boss sat me down, and I had a great relationship with my boss. He had worked at Honeywell for 40 years. Okay. That was his job, his only job, his only career. And he had, had a very successful career doing it. And same thing with my dad. He had been in his job for 25, 30 years until he retired. And so the idea of moving industries, the idea of leaving an area, the manufacturing world specifically, where procurement's well known, well understood, and going to a tech company where they didn't have any procurement. I was going to be the first one, where I remember sitting down with our chief procurement officer, because my boss, he's like, hey, I'm going to have you sit down. His name was Mike Slump. I'm going to have you sit down with Mike. And because I don't think this is the right career move for you. And Mike said, how many software companies exist that have procurement functions or need procurement functions? And of course, at the time, I was like, I have no idea. He's like, I'm guessing you could list them on maybe both of your hands. And maybe at the time, back in 2016, that was true. He's like, so why would you go there where no one knows procurement? But the reality is going back to your question, there's not one right path. I think I could have stayed at Honeywell, and I think I could have had a successful career there. And I, mapped it out and decided to make the leap. And in hindsight, I think it ended up being an incredible experience. And I don't know that it'd be on this call today if I didn't make that leap.
Yes, huge leap. And I think maybe what I love best about procurement and sourcing and the rise of these industries in the last few years, at least on the broader scope of what people know, is that every company needs procurement in some function, especially tech companies, to scale and to grow and to be good stewards of investment. And so that's kind of what I love about the last few years, is seeing procurement get its flowers a little bit more, and people recognizing that it's such a critical function, and it's not just for an enterprise. It's a function at any size of company, and you may not have a procurement title in the super small companies, but for what you do now at Tropic, What a perfect way to be an advocate and a champion of procurement than at a procurement tech company. And we'll talk about that later. We really skipped ahead.
We did skip ahead, but
We just couldn't wait.
I do agree with you though. I'm pretty active right now and trying to be, share my thoughts and my experiences. But if you rewind the clock, before I have had a LinkedIn profile for a long time, but I wasn't very active on LinkedIn. I remember after I had moved to, the world of tech, um, a lot of my contacts were in the manufacturing world, and I kind of wished I was on this island. And I think that you're right. I think the cool thing is more companies are adopting procurement, but I think a lot of them have, kind of this lone wolf mentality where like they'll hire, especially the smaller companies, one person, and so they're operating on an island. And that was very much the case for me. And it was a little lonely. I'm not going to lie. Like I built relationships with people in finance and engineering and marketing, et cetera. But, to be the only person at the company doing this was a little bit lonely. And I went to my boss and I said, "Hey, he's CFO." And I said, "Hey, will you reach out to your network of CFOs and will you ask them to connect me with other procurement people, on their teams?" In hindsight, maybe it was a little bit of lazy, but yeah, it's like leveraging my boss. And he said, "Sure." And he came back and he's like, "No one has procurement." And so in a moment of, I'm going to call it frustration, I was actually really worked up about it. I wrote this article, and this was my first foray into LinkedIn. It was really long. It was too long for a post. And it's like, "Hey, you should make this an article." And so it wrote an article, and it was "The tech world needs more procurement." And luckily I had the foresight to have a few friends like read it before I actually posted it, and they talked me off the ledge a little bit, and they made it less of an attack and more of like a "here's why" type of a written word. But it actually ended up doing really well. It definitely, I could sense even back then, this was, I don't know, 2017, 2018, even back then, that there was, even in the market where there was so much investment, so much free cash, there was this need, this need for more procurement. And so now you fast forward to 2025, and wow, procurement is in the hot seat right now. It's in the spotlight, and it's a lot of fun.
Yes. And that reminds me, around the same time, 2017. Yeah, 2017. I was working for a manufacturer. I was on the marketing side. And I was learning so much from the supply chain team. We did product launches together. We did product development together. It was such a cool process. I got to be looped in to how they sourced all of the raw materials and how they sourced pre-made materials. And I remember, getting myself ready to make my next shift in career and was considering going to UNA, which is a group purchasing organization, and on the procurement side. And I asked our head of supply chain, I was like, "Tell me about procurement. Like, how do we do that?" And he's like, "Well, I don't really know. I don't think we do procurement." And so that was such a disconnect at that time. Supply chain was so siloed, at least conceptually, from procurement teams. And so my step from manufacturing into procurement and procurement tech really kind of helped close the loop for me on that. And that timing of before 2020, I think, is really interesting, because once we all got a little bit heavier into LinkedIn, that's when procurement, I think, started to blossom.
It really has been, yeah, an amazing few years for procurement, honestly. Like it has come, I hate to use this analogy, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. But think about like how far AI has come in the past 12, 18 months. Like procurement, something that's been around for a long time, and I think AI has been around for a long time too, but it's only been in that last little bit there that it's kind of, people know what it is and are using it, that sort of thing. It's kind of like procurement, honestly. Like it's been around for couple decades now, at least formally. I think I've read the books, and I think it was like 1980 officially became like a term or a function, right? But really, it's been the past 4 or 5 years that it's started to really take off, especially in the tech industry. But I would say even beyond that, to be honest with you. So
Yeah. Well, this is a great segue because I was going to ask you about going to school for supply chain management. You went to BYU. And so that was your major, which I think, thinking about the timing of when we were both, in college, I had never heard of supply chain management. How did you land on that major?
Yes, very good question. Well, you might remember this when, because it sounds like, you being me a little ahead of me, but not by much. There was some years of, prosperity in the mid 2000s, and then there was a big crash, and so like my plan and the first, classes I was taking was always going to be finance. I was gonna go be a finance guy. That was my plan. I talked about earlier, I made money. I liked money. Let's go manage money. And then as I'm getting closer to kind of, you know, coming up on that decision, of when you're going to declare your major, there's a big market crash, and there's not a lot of finance jobs. There's a lot of finance layoffs, but not a lot of finance jobs. And I remember having this kind of point of clarity where you're watching people give up their houses, foreclosing on their houses. The market had just kind of completely fallen out, and I thought, if people are trying to figure out how to save money and how to reduce costs and how to continue to live, there legitimately has to be a job out there that helps companies reduce their spend, manage their spend strategically. And so it was similar to finance, but it was a little more than that. And so I remember going into the business school and asking those questions of, hey, like, is there, and I didn't frame it up. I doubt I used the word procurement because I probably didn't fully know that term, but I explained this concept, and they said, well, hey, there is a class called, procurement. There's a teacher, she teaches it, and it falls within the supply chain management major. An emphasis at the time, actually, is an emphasis at the time. And it wasn't even like, hey, do I go home and think about this? I went home and I am going to be a supply chain major. Like that's what I'm going to do. It was just like a light bulb click. And I don't think that happens very often in my life, but that's certainly one of those times when, and there was no debate after that. It was, this is what I'm going to do. And that's what I did. And then a year later, I, taken a lot of the classes and got a supply chain, internship with Honeywell, and finished my school and went back full time to work with them as a buyer on the new product sourcing team. So
Um, that's so cool. I think that's like the ideal path of finding supply chain and procurement. I don't know if you're familiar with Phil Eidson at Art of Procurement, but
of
one of
course,
his
yeah, of course.
his like favorite question to ask people is, did you find procurement or did procurement find you? And 9 times out of 10, procurement finds people after they're already out in the workforce and doing other things and realize that, okay, this is something I want to do. But you really thought critically about what you want to do and what you're passionate about, and then found it at probably the earliest time you possibly could have.
Yeah, the timing lined up, the stars lined up, and it was kind of meant to be for me. But I agree. I haven't met many people. Um, it happens probably more so today, and that, where, I don't want to say we're kids, but, people going to school, supply chain management is a bigger degree. I actually got my MBA from Arizona State, and supply chain management is a big deal at that school. But yeah, you're right. Like, people who are our age, and procurement usually finds them, not the other way around. So a little bit unique in that regard.
Yeah. Okay, so you get hired at Honeywell, and you're moving through your positions. When I looked at your LinkedIn profile, I was like, okay, so stepping up, can see those moves. And then okay, correct me if I'm wrong. While you were at Honeywell, you went and did 6 months in Romania for work. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was a short I mean, it was a little more than that. I think it was like 7 or 8 months, but yeah, it was a short expat assignment over in Romania, which was a phenomenal experience. It's too short, honestly. I would love to do it again.
So obviously a lot of global procurement learning as part of that experience, right? Or was it more local for you?
No, it was global. I mean, at Honeywell, our team managed indirect globally. And so,
Yeah.
I'd travel to India and I'd go over to, China, every year and, all across Asia, for sure. We had a lot of facilities down in Mexico and would go down there. So Honeywell is an awesome opportunity to work internationally, which, tons of learning for sure. Great experiences, but yeah, the highlight, the pinnacle of it was when I actually got to like relocate over to, another country. And part of it was a big part of our indirect procurement team was based in Bucharest, which is why it made sense to move there. But the team or Honeywell had also done a fairly large acquisition of a company called Elster, and so it was part, working with the local indirect procurement team, and it was also part helping from a procurement point of view, manage the integration of this acquisition and merging that supply chain and, analyzing, where there's overlap and commonality of suppliers and then obviously pushing that forward. So amazing experience. Definitely some core memories developed there.
Would you say that during your time there, you like expanded on your supplier relationship management skills? Because I would imagine going global in Romania, um, that's a you're getting thrown right into the quick fire for global supplier management.
Yeah, and it really taught me. There was one particular issue I can remember where it taught me the value of long-term strategic relationships with your suppliers. So there was one of our suppliers had a flood, and and the flooded facility meant that like they had to cease operations. There was very little inventory. And this in particular was for the aerospace industry where every, part that you buy has to be certified by government entities. It's not like you can just like say, okay, stop buying from one source and go and buy into another source, And if you had a good I mean, the reality is like it's supply and demand, and there was a ton of demand for it and very limited supply. Okay. And having a strong relationship with your supplier, having a strategic long-term relationship supplier was key and critical because that's who was getting the the parts, and it was just eye-opening to me that, if we had taken the approach of squeezing every dollar and, driving that price down to something unsustainable, we would be in a position where we could no longer ship our parts because they were lacking that core component.
So you went from global procurement at a massive organization, Honeywell, and then jumped to, and we talked about this a little bit, jumped to Qualtrics and starting a new procurement function. Tell me about like that. So you made the decision, you made the jump. Your boss and your boss's boss told you that you were making a big mistake.
Yeah.
Tell me about like your first 30 days. If you can remember like the feeling of starting something new. Um, and I think people that are maybe in this similar position where they're starting a procurement function, like what's that first 30 days like for you?
Great question. I want to start with like a positive, and then go into a lot of the negative. Okay. Because the positive is that it ended up being the best professional decision I have ever made. Like nothing even close. The first 30 days were rough. I was previously a cog in a wheel. Requests came to me. Procurement was known, established. There were processes. And I entered a new industry that I didn't know much about, to be honest with you. I was buying things I didn't know much about. People didn't know much about procurement, or worse, they thought they did, but it was a misconceived conception of procurement. Um, I was overwhelmed, to be honest with you. I felt flooded. I felt like, kind of like in new school, no one wants to sit with you at lunch type of a thing. It was a new industry. I went from wearing, not suits, but certainly like, slacks and dress shirts to tech industry is so interesting. I mean, it's, people are wearing gym clothes to work, pajamas sometimes, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this is whiplash in so many ways.
And now we don't even leave our
And
houses.
now we don't even leave our houses. You're right. Although interestingly enough, I almost feel like to compensate for that, sometimes we do dress up a little bit more. Just, I don't know, because, to make it feel a little more real sometimes. Anyway, yeah, it was those. I'm not going to say the first 30 days. The first year, honestly, was, now there's some wins tied in there, but it was really tough. There were no processes. People had been accustomed to doing things the way they wanted to do it, and they wanted to go fast. And they'd pull me in, and the variety of things I was buying. I mean, one minute you're buying a software solution that you really don't understand what it is or how it helps, and I just remember jotting down notes thinking, I'm going to Google this later because I don't want to look dumb. And the next minute you're talking to the marketing team about, some go-to-market, event that they want to do and how you can support them. And then next, you're talking about, a facility type support. And it was a lot of balls in the air and not a lot of resources. And, we can dive in this later, but when I eventually did make the move to a procure tech company, Tropic, it's because at the time there were tools that felt like they were built for the direct world. There were tools that felt like they were built for kind of enterprise companies, but I didn't feel like there were many tools built for what I needed. Nowadays, like that's completely changed, but it's kind of cool to work and build a solution that I wished I had, 8 years ago. I would have been super impactful for me. So, but yeah, ending on the good notes though is, I learned so much about procurement. I learned more about procurement and just business in general than I did in my 4 years at BYU and my 2 years in my MBA at Arizona State. It was a master class in all things procurement, and really helped set me up for fully understanding, the impact procurement can truly have, and the different aspects of procurement. Highly recommend, if anyone ever has that opportunity, to go establish a procurement function from the ground up. It's not easy, but it is very fulfilling, very rewarding, and it's going to do wonders for your career.
That's great advice. And I think the adventurous, risk-taking types are probably considering moves like that. And I hope that your story and what you're sharing helps inspire maybe those that are not as naturally adventurous, to help expand skill sets. And what a catapult for you in your career, because we talk about the time that you were at Qualtrics, and you were there through, let's see, how many years?
I was there about 5 years, just over 5 years. Yeah.
And the acquisition to Microsoft, right, happened while you were there.
SAP. Yeah.
Oh, SAP. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a wild ride. We're a private company. We were Series B, so we went through a Series C funding. There may have been one other funding round after that, and then there was all this momentum to IPO. Qualtrics had grown from I can't remember how many people there were. Less than 1,000 when I joined to several thousand at that time, and then 2 weeks prior to like the IPO date, I remember getting a call from my manager on a Sunday. I remember I was up in Idaho on some trip up near Coeur d'Alene, and it's like, boss doesn't usually call me on Sunday. And I was like, this is not normal. And he's like, hey, um, we're being acquired by SAP, $8 billion. And so I had all sorts of questions, but he's like, they're actually going to call a meeting on Sunday, come in if you can. And so I remember buzzing down back to headquarters in Utah and showing up on a Sunday evening. And the CEO of SAP at the time, his name is Bill McDermott. He's now the CEO of ServiceNow. He walked in, and there's an entourage of black I don't know, Escalades or something out front, because he's a big CEO. And yeah, just walked through it, and in some ways it was anticlimactic because you expect him to go to this IPO, but then you acquired by SAP, and then yeah, so that was life for the next year or two.
I'm not going to say you were the reason for the acquisition, but I would love to know what procurement's impact was in order to get Qualtrics in that position for such a big acquisition.
And I think this is actually a really good question, because before you're going to get acquired, or even, we were preparing for an IPO, there is a lot of oversight, a lot of meetings with auditors. There's a lot of scrutiny around the financials that occur. You're $8 billion. That's a hefty multiplier based off of forward-looking revenues, right? And so, I remember obviously having a lot of pride and thinking like, hey, we weren't profitable. There wasn't expectation to be profitable, but our finances were good. And I knew and by this time I had built a team, and I knew our team had something to do with that. We had a really good due diligence process, for, vetting new suppliers, which, is mitigating risk. And I remember sitting down with our auditors, and they said, okay, well, walk us through, your supplier due diligence. And I'd show them our document. Like, okay, moving on to the next topic. It was just really kind of fulfilling that it was vetted and validated by a third party. They understood that value protected the business. And yeah, just kind of set us up to be an attractive acquisition target for sure. Now, once again, you're right. I am not trying to say like procurement's the reason we were acquired for $8 billion, but I do think, and I've seen other companies where they, in fact, I won't name names, but there was another company locally that they were going to go public, and they had issues with supplier relationships, where it's like, hey, we're doing business with, the co-founder's brother's company and stuff like that. And it's because they didn't have a procurement function that was looking after, the relationships, making sure that, things are competitively bid out, that there's none of that kind of, interesting business, that sometimes happens at kind of smaller companies. And then, yeah, just having a lot of source and pride, and like, we've set up competitive contracts with our suppliers. We have a really strong supply base that's helping us perform. There's that old saying that companies don't compete against companies, right? Supply chains compete against supply chains. I often will compare, procurement teams to an HR team. HR is tasked with going and finding the right, from a recruiting perspective, the right employees. Well, procurement's tasked with going and finding the right suppliers who help the company perform. HR is tasked with like monitoring, employee performance and setting goals and things like that. Well, we're tasked with, ensuring suppliers are performing. And I think having a strong supply base, a performing supply base, is a competitive advantage. And you need a procurement function that's going to help drive that strategically.
Okay, so everybody in startup world or scale up world, yeah, where they're looking for that acquisition or that's on the, in the future, in the near future, if you don't already have a procurement program stood up, perhaps this is your sign to start investing in it.
Yeah, and going back to that article about the tech world need more procurement. Most companies need more procurement, and they need it sooner, because you do it later and you're trying to undo a lot of things that have already been done. And that's hard, that's difficult. and also the impact you can have even at a smaller company is usually still pretty profound. So, but the nice thing is that as investor preferences have changed over the past 2 or 3 years, that's really opened up the door for procurement as well. Where it used to be, hey, here's $100 million in this raise, and they would encourage you, go spend it, like go funnel that growth. And now they say, hey, here's $100 million, but we're going to give it to you, but we need to see that path to profitability, and you need to be here at the next point if you're going to get more money from us, type of a thing. And so, it's not just focused on the top line anymore. It's definitely a big focus on the bottom line, which we are well equipped to facilitate.
Yeah, and I love that you have such a rich perspective in procurement and best practices, and you've gone through the process with a startup to acquisition, and now you're at Tropic, which I'm sure a lot of the customers of Tropic are in a similar position. And so you're bringing quite a bit of experience. And so do you find yourself now you're on the other side, being a solution provider? How has your point of view or your thought processes changed now that you're dealing with people on the other side of procurement?
Yeah. I stated earlier that the best decision I ever made was to make that move to a company where I was like founding a procurement function. Okay. I'm now going to say that joining a procure tech solution is the number 2 best career move I've made. And the reason why is just because, when I worked at Qualtrics and at MX, leading the procurement function, I got to work with pretty much all departments, supporting the entire company. But it's a different angle in my view. So first and foremost, if anyone says I've left procurement, like, they're wrong. I am very much Tropic's head of procurement. I manage our spend. I negotiate a lot of our contracts, et cetera. We have a unique services team that I get to rely on, and they're amazing. But I also I was on a call today with customers who are setting up, they're making that jump into procurement, and sometimes it's a dedicated procurement function, and sometimes it's a project manager who's been tasked with this, or a finance leader who's been tasked with this. And so I get to consult with them a lot on, hey, this is how I set up, procurement functions, and kind of strategize with them, which is amazing. So I get to work with the go-to-market and the marketing teams and speak at conferences and things about that, about why people should invest in procurement in general, why it's important to have, an amazing tool, a spend management tool, and even invest in a job potentially. I get to work with, current customers and help them consult on how to, elevate their procurement function and be more strategic about it from a sourcing perspective, from being more proactive. I get to work with the product team on designing, feature sets that I know I want and I need. And I will sit down with them and say, guys, this is so important to me, and here's why. But I'll also reach out to my network and say, hey, how is this being received by you? Because I don't want to be one data point that's overwhelming, because everyone's experience is different, So I'll organize kind of events or panels and allow other people to share their perspective. And so I get to work with the product team. I just, it's a phenomenal experience to implement, execute, design, and build a tool that I know will help me do my job, or people like me as well, do my job better. And that is exciting, because for so many years I was lacking that. I didn't have that tool that are available today. So
I think it was such a smart move and so strategic of Tropic to bring you on as head of procurement, because there is nothing better than having your ICP, your ideal client, under your own roof and being able to get that perspective. So I hope your sales team is taking advantage. I hope marketing is taking advantage.
They are. It's a great
Yeah.
collaboration. I'm surprised. I've seen a few companies do it. I'm surprised it's not more prolific, to be honest with you. Sometimes you have the founders themselves came from the procurement world, and that makes a lot of sense. But in the event that they're not, like, who is that SME internally who, um, you know, is going to help kind of design and build? And so yeah, it's been a great. I actually joined Tropic as an advisor. Coming up on 5 years ago, actually, while I was still working full time for other companies because it was a smaller company. But then I joined full time just over 2 years ago, and it's been once again it was one of those points in my career where Dave, the CEO, was like, "Hey, why don't you come work full time?" And I'm just thinking like, same thing with Qualtrics, like, is this the right career move for me? And then but then going forward with it, and then looking back, hindsight's 2020, right? But looking back, thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did that.
Yeah. And looking forward, this leads me to my final question. What do you think the future holds for procurement in the next 5, 10 years? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I love this question. I am very bullish about 2025 specifically. I actually posted about this today. I think the past couple of years, there's been a lot of focus on cost savings, cost reduction, which is great because it put it put procurement in the spotlight, Tropic in the spotlight too, but it put procurement in the spotlight. But now there's a shift, right? There's a shift from cost savings and cost reduction to what I'm going to call cost optimization, where the SaaS market is actually bouncing back a little bit, and so companies still need to be profitable. But rather than just like, hey, how do we save money? How do we cut costs? Whatever, they're saying, how do we go and find that best in class supplier at the right price that's going to help us juice our engines again? Okay. Help us go back into growth mode, but growth controlled, sustainable, et cetera. I do think that 2025 and 2026 and 27, we're going to see, I'm a little bullish on the economy and the direction we're going. And so going back to my Qualtrics days, there wasn't a need to drive savings, not much of it. It was the need to help align and find the best in class suppliers and minimize that risk and have strong relationships and set up those contracts. And I think that we're going into that a little bit. And so I think that cost optimization is going to be really exciting. And then I'm really bullish on AI. There's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of data in contracts, and it is really hard to leverage that. But you have a powerful tool like generative AI, a lot of times built into existing tools that can really help streamline your procurement efforts. I think a lot of time procurement gets dragged into more tactical tasks that takes away from the strategic focus. They're important and they're urgent, but they're distracting. And I think generative AI tools and also just a better stronger procure tech scene and stronger network is going to make it to where you can do more with less. I remember, going back to that story and kind of turning this full cycle. When I was at Qualtrics, I'd walk into this meetings and say, I don't even know what this company does that I'm buying. Right now, I can get a very quick download from ChatGPT or Claude or whatever about or use Tropic supplier intelligence tool about what a company does, but not also get benchmarking data of what's possible, also how to achieve that data, also who potential competitors are. And that may have taken me weeks to put together that sort of like category management strategy and fill it with data. And now I'm focused on the strategic category management sourcing part of it because that data is much easier to kind of glean and pick up. And so I think that's going to allow procurement to have a huge impact on their businesses and play a much bigger role than they've historically done.
Agreed. And I'm excited for the future of procurement, supply chain, and all of the intertwined industries in the supply world. And I'm so thankful that you came on the show today and shared your very unique perspective. I think every time we do this, people are connecting on a deeper level with each person that comes through. Everybody has had completely different backgrounds, and yours, I think, might be the most wide and dynamic. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit more personal information about yourself and your journey with us and the ISM audience.
Well, thank you for having me. Obviously, a lot's changed over the past 5 years. I would say one of the best thing that's happened is just the stronger network. People are relying on each other. People are reaching out to each other. We're not on these islands anymore. At least we don't need to be. If we are, we're self-isolated because the network community has really expanded, and that's awesome. So, for anyone listening, drop me a line. Let's connect. If I can help in any way, absolutely willing to do so, and appreciate everyone else who continues to help me and weigh in on content and provide their feedback. And it's a great experience where we're much stronger as a whole, and we're much greater than the sum of our individual parts.
Love it. So, listeners, get connected with Michael here on LinkedIn. And if you're curious about Tropic, you can go to tropicapp.io. Is that correct?
You
The
got it.
website?
That's right. That's right.
Or ask Michael
Or
about
just
it.
ask me. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Much easier that way.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And thanks for tuning in. Next month, we will have Amanda Prochaska on with
Oh,
us.
she's so good. Good
I
job.
love
She's
Amanda.
awesome. Yeah, Amanda's great.
So be sure to tune in, and we'll be posting more about that coming up pretty soon. Hope you all have a great rest of the week. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.